Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Conquer the Clutter podcast, July the 6th. Do you believe it? Where is the summer going? We're well and truly into it. Today's topic is anxiety. Why? Because so many of you tell me if it isn't the sole thing you're working with, it is so frequently a part of the challenges that you live with. And even if genetically or situationally you don't have anxiety, I know that living in a cluttered environment, particularly if you join our podcast, I know that the whole side effect of hoarding, even just problematic clutter, causes anxiety in people. It also, however, dysregulates us emotionally, which means that it further disables us in our desire, in our motivation to do something about it. And anxiety is more than just a feeling of being stressed or worried. Anxious feelings are quite normal. Most of us expect them in life. Usually, they're a reaction to a situation that puts us under pressure, like deadlines. Can also be those piles and possibly pathways that sit in front of you, nagging you, judging you, reminding you, overwhelming you. Another experience that stresses many people and possibly results in anxiety are tests. Maybe the test of ourself, the test of our motivation. Exams. Speaking in front of a group of people, many people find a tremendous stressor. And Braden, edit. Anxious feelings can edit. Anxious feelings can hijack you by coming upon you suddenly and for no apparent reason. Anxious feelings, even short of an anxiety disorder, and the hormonal after effects can linger even after the stressful event is ended. Our anxious experience can be very different. Braden, again. Our experience with anxiety can be very difficult to explain, even to ourselves, because it can feel kind of vague but ominous. It also often feels just like it weighs us down. This can affect our health. It can also control us. That results in us feeling vulnerable, like we're facing doom, a vague gray doom. Remember, what we tell ourselves is based on Braden again. Remember, what we tell ourselves based on sometimes just our hormonal balance can affect our perception of how other people are experiencing us, or perhaps we think judging us. When we feel anxious, one of the worst things others can do is try to reassure the anxious person. Automatic reassurance can feel very annoying and dismissive. A person's anxiety, each of our anxieties, is a very real experience. Even though quite often the precipitating causes can be vague and kind of hard to see, hard to understand, how to put together in why we feel anxious. Many of my clients have told me that the hardest thing about having anxiety is the isolation with it, that no one really understands their anxiety and what it's like. And I've even occasionally put my foot right in it by saying exactly the wrong thing to somebody who was telling me they had anxiety. By trying to make that person understand that I do understand, I say, I understand. But the truth is, none of us really understand unless we have what the other person says they're experiencing. What's that expression? You don't really know something until you've walked a mile in the shoes of the other person telling you about it. But what we can always do, if we can do it truthfully, is empathize. All right. But remember, the person with anxiety is right. Until we actually experience anxiety in the same way as they do, we can't really truly claim to understand what they're feeling and dealing with. I want to give everyone kind of a primer on anxiety, so you come to it with an adequate understanding. There are different types of anxiety. The first is generalized anxiety. And that is where the feeling of doom, the feeling of downness, the feeling of agitation is kind of vague. And it's not specific to a particular thing or event. It seems to permeate, though, the whole of the individual and the whole of the person's mindset. It also permeates and affects the energy that that person has day to day. So if you're anxious and you're expecting yourself to perform because everybody's telling you, you just clean it up, just do a little bit at a time. If you're also carrying that burden, that dysregulator of anxiety, give yourself a break, be gentle with yourself. Anxiety sucks the energy, disrupts the energy of what you have and the focus day to day. With generalized anxiety, a person feels anxious most days. They worry about a lot of different things. If this has existed for you or anyone you know for 6 months or more, then they need to know that they have developed a disorder. That disorder is called generalized anxiety disorder, and the short form for that is GAD. The second type of anxiety I want to talk to you about is social anxiety. It's just another form where individuals often feel less than. They can feel like imposters. They often tell me that they feel awkward, like somehow they don't fit in, they have no place. And even when others aren't judging them, they feel like they're being judged or watched or assessed. Social phobia occurs when a person has an intense fear of being criticized, embarrassed, shamed, or humiliated. An example in everyday situation is speaking in a meeting, eating in public, being assertive and setting boundaries and limits that we actually expect to work and be honored. A third type of anxiety is post-traumatic stress. Generally, this arises in response to a traumatic event. Onset can be from an overload of lesser traumatic events, and they just compile to overwhelm the person. First responders are hugely, hugely susceptible to this. So are their families, through the vicarious experience of sympathizing. In an effort to support the other family member, they take on a vicarious trauma by experiencing secondhand the trauma, that trauma that overloaded their first responder family member. Things like traumatic car events, seeing people in really unnatural positions and situations. The sadness often evokes memories and triggers memories or feelings that they have residual to events in their own life. And then it becomes more real. It becomes like it's really home in them. Symptoms of post-traumatic stress, in case you need to know, Symptoms of post-traumatic stress, in case you need to know, can include overwhelming difficulty in just unwinding and relaxing, always on edge, always just ready for the bell to go off, upsetting and intrusive dreams or flashbacks, especially of disturbing events. And then going on to extreme efforts to avoid anything related to the type of event that triggered the trauma, like driving. In the case of a really disastrous car event, in the case of a really disastrous car accident, vehicle accident, they may, their reaction under the stress may be to try to avoid, their reaction under the stress of it may be to avoid driving themselves or avoid locations where the previous car accident disturbs them. Or I've even seen this, where you're out with an individual who is living with post-traumatic stress, and every time they go by a place or near a place, they re-trigger, they reassign the meaning of that place, and they relive in part the trauma and the hormonal after effects and the emotional after effects. Distressing recollections are on their minds, and those distressing recollections gain control, and they're unable to take back control and minimize that residual effect of the trauma. All right. They're unable also to manage the feelings and the emotional reactions, sometimes even the physical reactions associated with the trauma or anything that resembles the trauma. Another anxiety disorder is panic. All right. And that is a form of anxiety where when the anxiety builds up, it can build up suddenly and intrusively to a point even of completely taking over the individual and making it nigh on to impossible to sort the precipitating situation out. What that means is they lack the ability strategically to think of a way to managing and to get themselves out of the panic reaction and bring themselves back to normal. They quite often need help and intervention. With a panic disorder, an individual can become paralyzed or can become paralyzed. With a panic disorder, a person can become paralyzed or disoriented. Why? By intense, overwhelming, and often uncontrollable feelings associated, which we call anxiety. This intense shutdown can generate a range of physical symptoms like shortness of breath, increased heart rate, sweating, confusion. Phobias and agoraphobia are, like shortness of breath, increased heart rate, sweating, confusion. The last type of anxiety disorder that I want to talk to you about is phobias and agoraphobia. These are other forms where the anxiety is usually prompted by something specific outside of the individual. Phobic individuals, for instance, will go to great lengths to avoid anything associated with the phobia, even to the degree that they won't go outside and risk coming in contact with the thing that they have this phobic aversion to. Obsessive compulsive disorder is another form of anxiety where the individual has compulsions. It could be to anything. And in order to deal with those compulsions and anxiety that arises, rituals are developed. And these rituals are carried out, why? In order to soothe the compulsions, But the person gets caught up in the never-ending loop where the rituals actually become a new form of tyranny all on their own. Why? Because they take up so much time, so much energy and space in the person's day-to-day life, and they take it up involuntarily. That is against the other person's will. The other thing that can happen is that the symptoms of anxiety sometimes aren't all that obvious. We did say before that they can be vague. So sometimes they can be really difficult so sometimes they can often develop gradually. How many people present today? Take a note, take out that pencil and paper. List. If today you feel anything that has been listed on the list that I've just dictated, how many people here present today at today's podcast can honestly say that they feel or have felt any of the feelings that were listed, or any that I'm going to list now? Is there anyone here today present who can say that they are not to some degree overwhelmed? And that feeling of being overwhelmed generates a feeling that they may not have called anxiety, that feels uncontrollable. Not all the time, but from time to time can disrupt them, can overtake them. And sometimes it may even, if not addressed and identified, become an overwhelming panic. Hot and cold flushes, racing heart, tightening in the chest, that causes that previous symptom, shortness of breath, sweating, involuntary shaking that's not medication related, a lack of sensation or numbness, or the reverse, tingling and itching, and that agitation in your nerves, below your skin, not because of a neurological or orthopedic issue. How about feeling dizzy, lightheaded, or faint? What about just plain worried? But worried like a snowball going downhill, beyond their ability to manage. And as it builds, it's just gathering more and more and more fear. Vaguer and vaguer and harder to delineate exactly what it's about. All right. Has anybody ever experienced that? And then also experienced the symptom of the fear that this situation, this vague thing, may be about a condition, a health condition, mental health, physical health, that might be a harbinger of a serious situation that might overtake them, like letting go of possessions, even ones that the individual themselves know they don't need and are very unlikely to need. Do you feel that daunting, overwhelming feeling of dread, of uncertainty, of confusion? How many people have felt that vague sense of dread? Make a note today that something bad is going to happen if you let that thing go. All right. And that bad thing that can happen can be described in a wide variety of consequences. What are the consequences that you're afraid will happen? Because dread is very, very common in hoarding situations, especially where the person stays locked and immobilized behind their door, waiting to be discovered. What about constantly feeling tense, nervous, or on edge? Sometimes even to the extent of nausea or actual vomiting. When you wear yourself out enough, what's your physical, emotional response? Stomach pains, headaches, muscle pains, muscle spasms if it's gone on long enough, especially in the areas of the body where we are supposed to register tension the most. Our neck, our back, our jaw. When it's gone on long enough and it's more intense or long-lasting, more than we can easily tolerate, sometimes a person can even feel detached from their physical self or their surroundings. They just feel kind of foggy, little disoriented, not like being drunk or high or anything else, just you're not really in touch or aware of your surroundings in a way that you need to in order to mobilize yourself. Okay, you don't have to feel like you're levitating off the ground for this to be true. It could just be that you really don't feel like you have a hold on your surroundings or a hold on yourself or to any degree a real attachment or involvement in what's going on, or how to work through a situation that you don't like how to deal with the piles of things that are kind of sitting there, kind of judging, kind of overwhelming you. And that results in a temptation to put things down and leave the things there. And we tell ourselves, just for now, but there is no just for now. Tomorrow never comes. Do you realize that? Don't say, I'll do it tomorrow. Do as much as you possibly can today of what you can do. Because when you put things down just for now, you now have 5 jobs. You have to re-see that the thing is there because you've probably forgotten about it, out of sight, out of mind. Then you have to pick it up anyway. You have to remember, what is this and what was I doing with this? You have to remember, okay, so where does this go? And then you have to do it anyway. Why would you opt for 5 jobs when you had it in your hand, it was only 1? Could it be that you are overwhelmed with unaddressed anxiety? There are answers, and we're going to get to those answers in the upcoming 2 to 3 podcasts. So know there is hope. Don't wait for tomorrow. Because if you're so overwhelmed that you can't easily enough carry an action through to completion, that's what I want to help you with. And finally, when all of this has taken its toll, this just for now, this distraction, this delay, this anxiety, this overwhelmness, it quite often leads people to a feeling of a lack of meaning or sense of purpose, or knowing that you have a purpose. Worse yet, feeling that you have a purpose, but you've lost your way. You're going in circles and you can't figure out how to stop. It's become an automatic behavior. And so you distract yourself with behaviors that come to and address those feelings, those symptoms. Distraction's a good one. It isn't leading you anywhere you want to be, though. And they are quite commonly making you withdraw and avoid. Later never comes. Later is always out in the future. Okay? Can also lead to just a feeling that your only option is to endure with fear those situations that cause anxiety. And so to ease that anxiety, you develop and perform certain rituals to relieve the anxiety. If you do that often enough, or you have any proclivity to it, you may now just have gotten on the path to OCD behaviors. When you do that, those rituals are never going to solve the anxiety. No matter how many times or how well you do them, feeling less intimidated, less worthy, not being able to be assertive, or even avoid a situation, it's just like a train wreck coming. Have you ever felt indecisive? Had difficulty making decisions, especially about how to undo a pile or a pathway, especially how to undo a pile or a pathway. And it's overwhelming. And so you end up adding to the piles and pathways. Why do you think this is happening? Hoarding degrees. Why do you think this is happening? Hoarding disorder, or a degree of hoarding, is made worse by the onset of anxiety. So at the very first symptoms of it, start finding out what it's about, start dealing with it, start getting the help you need. Maybe you're just on the eclipse of anxiety. Are you easily startled? Has your anxiety invaded your dreams so that your dreams are upset? Has your anxiety invaded your dreams so that your dreams are upsetting? Are you having flashbacks or intrusive thoughts or images? Sometimes they're about unwelcome or embarrassing events, the things that could happen. Wouldn't you feel foolish if? All right. Do you find yourself stuck in a loop of worry and find it extremely difficult, feeling almost impossible to stop it? Or do you find that you have unwanted or intrusive thoughts that I mentioned? Or do you find that you have unwanted or intrusive thoughts, as I mentioned before? Difficulty sleeping, difficulty falling asleep, difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep. Or are you a restless sleeper? Do you know whether you get any REM sleep? REM sleep is the only time your body and mind heal. And your body and your mind are always trying to heal you. Don't let the anxiety get control so that you can't get the natural healing that sleep will give you. How do you expect to sort out and make decisions about the piles or prevent them from happening in the first place if you're experiencing other symptoms, other behaviors associated with anxiety? Difficulty concentrating, for instance. So does this mean that anxiety in some way makes you mentally ill? No, we are all anxious at some times in our life, and sometimes it's more and sometimes it's less. It's only if it goes on in a pervasive way for 6 months or more that you really are at risk of having an anxiety disorder. Don't let it go that long or that far before you start identifying, this isn't how I want to feel. I deserve to feel better. Where is the help I need? What do I need? Where is it? And how do I get enough of it to make enough of a difference? And remember the fourth point, accept no substitutes. So you're not defective. You're not incompetent. You're not mentally ill. You're not irreparably doomed to live with anxiety. That's not what this means. We are all up and down on that continuum of mental illness, mental wellness. Some of us, okay, on a bad day, we wouldn't score very high. And I own that as much as anybody else. All right. It happens to all of us. You're not alone. Depending on what happens, how competent do you feel to deal with it or not deal with it and get the help you need to help you deal with it? There are 4 basic reasons that kind of are the backstory to anxiety. The first is long-term predisposing causes. All right. That could be like living in a hoarded environment. It could be that genetically you have inherited a predisposition for some other condition where one of the side effects, one of the symptoms is some degree of anxiety. The second basic reason is living in an abusive relationship, an abusive or living in an abusive relationship. That living in an abusive relationship can also be with yourself. You can abuse yourself by not asking yourself, what do I need? Where is it? And how do I get enough of it to make enough of a difference? Why should I not count at least equally to these things? Living in a neglectful relationship as well. So if you grew up with narcissistic parents and you have to some degree narcissistic partner, you're playing out an old theme. It doesn't mean you have to ditch the partner, but it does mean you need to learn how to first understand you do have needs and what they feel like, and then set boundaries and limits that protect your physical and mental and emotional health. You're worth it. Living in a desert, okay, when it comes to your physical and emotional needs being met, is not a good recipe. Martyrdom is not a good recipe for good mental health. Mentioned biological causes. Some people, unfortunately, neurologically inherit a predisposition for some type of anxiety. Anxiety can also be triggered by short-term triggering and precipitating causes. Difficulty in a person's life, loss, impending setbacks, like job insecurity, financial insecurity, health insecurity, housing insecurity. Like there aren't enough challenges in life. Be your strongest and first advocate. Okay. Anxiety can be maintained, and it is maintained by not dealing with the causes, not dealing with the events. There's always something you can do. You can make a long list of what you can't do, and that may be true. But amid that situation of what you can't do, believe me, there is always something you can do. Start with the small, little, regular things that you can do and build from there out of your anxious state. So over the next few podcasts, please make a habit of tuning in, because we're going to be talking about how to master the part of your anxiety that overwhelms you. Can we guarantee that it solves it? No, we can't. But I can absolutely help you develop skills and strategies and competencies to help you see those anxious building situations coming, and often how to avoid it. Definitely how not to repeat it. And the next few podcasts are going to help you deal with it as it impacts your life right now. So I want you this week to do a little homework. I want you to make a list of how anxiety, depression, whatever negative mental and emotional experiences you're having are costing you in your life. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit about strategies so I can help you start off before next week coping with whatever anxiety, to whatever degree you have it, just a little better. Okay, let's start out by underscoring anxiety is complex, and there are different predisposing and precipitating factors that contribute to perpetrating anxiety. So there's no easy fix and there's no one size fits all. Like with my hoarding work, I recommend a holistic approach. We come to a situation as intact human beings, all right, and we can't parse out little parts of a person to help. We need to help that person identify what they need, how much of it they need, how much of it they can accept, and then digest it and use it systemically and holistically for their own benefit. Number one, okay? What causes anxiety? Behavioral experiences can cause anxiety. Our behaviors matter. The choices we make matter. So give them some thought. Put yourself on pause and give yourself a chance to figure out, in this situation, given the context, what do I need? Where is it? And how do I get enough of it to make enough of a difference? And no, I will not, in the meantime, accept any substitutes. Even if we can't entirely control the behavior of feeling anxious, it is positive for us to learn how to mitigate it or lessen it. All right? Because whatever the behavior is that coexists with anxiety, chances are it's not making the anxiety any better. And it probably is preventing us from moving forward. How many times have I said, what we tell ourselves determines the importance and the meaning we take away from any situation. So we need to be very, very careful not to listen to the committee, and also to ask ourselves one more time, what do I need? Where is it? And how do I get enough of it to make enough of a difference? And no, I will not accept any substitutes. In the meantime, I also want you to start asking yourself when these situations occur. Just take yourself aside for a second. Why is this happening to me? Why is it happening now? What part of what I'm doing, thinking, feeling is maintaining this problem? How do I maintain this problem? You may not be totally responsible for the maintenance of the problem, but if you're in it, you're part of it. How are you? What are you doing? Thinking, feeling, saying. Okay, that helps this problem to be maintained. One of the first things I want you to challenge is if you ever say to yourself, I can't, because I can't determines the ending. And reasonably, instead of I can't, ask yourself, okay, these are the things I don't feel I can do, but what can I do to lessen it? In Conquer the Clutter, Strategies to Identify, Manage, and Overcome Hoarding, I outlined some relaxation techniques, especially de-stress breathing. If we can't, especially de-stress breathing, we can't live without our breath. And if we breathe in a way that is way up in our chest, we're creating and maintaining the panic in the other parts of ourselves because we're not giving the cells in our body enough oxygen to help us manage. At a cellular level, we're starving ourselves. So belly breathe. 20 to 30 minutes of active exercise is also a really good idea. Even just walking. You can't walk for whatever reason, just marching in place with your arms swinging. Get all parts of your body moving. You would be surprised at the effect, all right, the positive effect that that gives your mood and your energy. If Harvard tells professionals who pay a lot to come to their courses that exercise is a major benefit in the case of depression, anxiety, and other mental health disorders, who are we to argue? Okay. Watch the quick fix foods. Watch the amount of sugar you eat, caffeine you consume, fats, carbohydrates, which only give us a ravenous appetite for more carbohydrates and fats. Other stimulants, medicated or not, are not the answer. Coffee, alcohol, for instance. Feelings aren't facts. They are the summary of how we put our understanding of the event that we're facing together and how it's registering with us at a hormonal level as well as an emotional level. All right. The hormones we send to our brain dictate how we feel. They also limit or enhance the openness of options we will allow ourselves. So be really careful that we aren't sending garbage, or we aren't giving our body one of the basic things it needs to energize us: oxygen. Watch the thoughts you allow. All right. Watch the default perceptions and judgments you go to first. They will create that hormonal soup that will either energize and mobilize you or overwhelm you and discourage you. Are you perpetrating an unfound? Are you, by the judgments and perceptions and thoughts you allow yourself? Are you perpetrating old, unfounded, erroneous beliefs? Are you externalizing the pain that you feel in anxiety, the hurt feelings, the anger, also the happiness and successes? Journal all of them or record them. Above all else, be vigilant about your self-talk. Be gentle with yourself, people. Nobody ever overcame anything difficult by feeling less about themselves. Don't do that to yourself. And how positively what can we do to create some additional positive impact to our core beliefs? We can challenge them, for one thing. All right, so that they can promote a calmer and more accepting attitude we have to ourselves, even at our worst moments, because we are the only thing we can control. Other strategies like CBT-ing yourself, that's cognitive behavioral therapy-ing yourself, are good. All right, that's the why me, why now? What am I doing? How am I contributing to maintaining this situation I don't want? And what prevents me? What prevents this situation from being resolved? What do I have, even a little bit of it, to mitigate the negativity? All right. And we can talk more about all of that at the next podcast, because it will definitely help you to change the way you think and the thoughts that you give time and space to. Okay. And we can talk more about that at the next podcast, because it will help you to change the way you think. It'll help you change the thoughts that you give time and space to. How do we do that? We do it by identifying those thoughts so that we remember them accurately. In journaling, we review them, we record them, we acknowledge them, we accept them exactly as we feel them, as they're going through our mind and as we think and feel about them that day. Then we read them back. We learn to challenge those thoughts. All right, yeah, that's the way it feels, but really, is that 100% of the truth? The things we've written, the way we feel, particularly when we're not our best self? Is there nothing else that's part of that situation that created that? Next, we learn to question ourselves. Questions like, is there any evidence for this negative thought I'm having? Okay, if it's true, where's the proof? Is there any evidence against this negative thought? Okay, before I commit to this, I believe it and I commit to it. Is there anything that I'm not paying attention to that says, come on, this is not the whole story? What is the effect of thinking positively, choosing the positive option for me? What is the effect or consequence of me choosing the negative option? And how can I test it, just a little test, to find out much better before I commit time and energy, myself, to these thoughts and the outcomes they will produce? Let's do a little test. Okay. let's ask ourselves, what's overwhelming me? Is it true? Is it as permanent as it feels? Because it can feel pretty overwhelming. It can feel pretty like that's going to be the way it turns out. Some people find writing positive affirmations about themselves and sticking them up on walls and mirrors, especially in the private areas of their accommodation. I have a few for you next week that a client of mine who has just had a major breakthrough and has worked like a Dickens to get it gave me. They're beautiful. Those affirmations, they should be the first thing you look at in the morning and the last thing you look at before you get into bed at night. All right. And if you need it, get the help you need. What do I need? If it's help, in what form would be useful? All right. And how can I get it? That's why I do these podcasts free of charge. That's why my website has a gazillion resources free of charge. All right. That's why I'm here. All right. Is to help you get as much of what you need as it's possible for you to have and make it available to you. All right. It's so that nobody gets left behind just because they don't have the means to pay for services that are available to other people. There's always something to help. I'll see you next week. Really looking forward to it. Have a great one, as great as you possibly can make it. Take care, everybody.